Hello everyone and welcome to my Bachelor Nation 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Joan Vassos reveals Gerry's divorce wasn't just about location. The Golden Bachelorette star, Joan Vassos, acknowledges many challenges with dating at her age. While she isn't going to give up her family, she understands some compromises need to happen. However, while discussing those negotiations, she reveals Golden Bachelor Gerry Turner and Theresa Nist's divorce wasn't just about location. Gerry Turner and Theresa Nist weren't meant to be. Although the Golden Bachelorette, Joan Vassos has clearly said she isn't interested in moving away from her family, she is still open to dating someone from a distance. Undoubtedly, Joan learned from Gerry Turner and Theresa Nist's experience. Since they both have established families they are close to, they said that location became an issue. Sadly, after a speedy wedding, the couple divorced just 3 months later. But Joan is considering that issue when going through her journey to find love again. Joan Vassos understands she will need to compromise. After Joan Vassos' one-on-one date with Chalk Chapel, the issue of distance was brought up in an interview with Glamour. Since Joan lives in Maryland and Chalk lives in Kansas, if they continue to hit it off, then location is a big piece to the puzzle. When the subject came up, Joan said she had spent time thinking about the challenge of living and having a family in different states. She says, "You can't ask anybody to give up something that important. You have to compromise in other ways, which is making a bigger effort on each of your parts to see each other and maybe figure out another home where everybody comes to see each other sometimes." Previously, she has talked about meeting in the middle by resolving to pick the most important events to attend with each other's families, but finding solace in the idea they will have time apart. Admittedly, Joan says that dating at her age is hard. Joan Vassos reveals Gerry's divorce wasn't just about location. During the interview, they joked about having an airline sponsorship to make the travel back and forth easier across the country. Undeniably, it seems like a perfect match for Bachelor Nation to partner with an airline and promote the ease of finding love away from home. Furthermore, the interviewer talks about how their locations were the big pitfall for Gerry Turner and Theresa Nist, who live in Indiana and New Jersey. Laughingly, Joan Vassos calls them out. She says, "I know, come on. What's the big deal? Get on Southwest Airlines." But she divulges, but there were bigger problems there. Joan alludes to Gerry and Theresa having unresolvable issues that didn't solely include the location problem that was stated. Although she didn't completely spill the tea, she gave enough information for Golden Bachelor fans to connect the dots, confirming there is more to their divorce than they vocalized. Undoubtedly, Joan understands that her relationship will require sacrifices with the time spent together with a new man. Joan Vassos sat at the edge of the plush leather chair in her dimly lit living room, her posture a contrast to the warmth and softness surrounding her. The flickering light from a fireplace added an amber hue to the room, but it couldn't shake the heaviness of her heart. Across from her sat an interviewer, notebook in hand, recorder turned on, ready to dive into a story Joan had never fully shared. The topic was Gerry Turner, the man who had captured America's attention on the Golden Bachelor and more significantly, the truth behind his divorce that had left many scratching their heads. It wasn't just about location, Joan began, her voice steady but reflective, her eyes tracing the lines of the past. Since Gerry Turner's appearance as the leading man on the Golden Bachelor fans had been fascinated by his backstory. A charming, widowed gentleman looking for love later in life, seemingly healing from the loss of his late wife. However, it was his divorce, a quieter chapter, that had piqued the curiosity of many. Gerry had touched on it briefly, attributing it mostly to a misalignment on where they wanted to live. But Joan had spent enough time with Gerry behind the scenes, during the whirlwind taping of the show and beyond, to know that this was only part of the story. She had come to admire Gerry's openness and honesty. But she knew that when it came to his divorce, there was a deeper layer he had kept private, perhaps for the sake of grace. Now, she felt compelled to tell the truth, not out of malice, but out of the respect she felt for their shared time and the journey they had both embarked upon. People assume that when a marriage ends, it's because of a big, dramatic fallout, Joan said, leaning forward, her hands clasped together as if trying to hold onto the words that were now coming to life. But sometimes it's the small, insidious things that chip away at a relationship, and that's what happened with Gerry. Gerry had always been the romantic type, the kind of man who would surprise his partner with spontaneous dates, roses just because, or a heartfelt note left on the kitchen counter. Yet that same deep well of affection had made him vulnerable to disappointments he rarely voiced but held onto tightly. Joan spoke about how Gerry, throughout his marriage, had silently longed for more than just companionship. He wanted depth, intimacy, a shared vision for the future that went beyond just the logistics of where to live. His ex-wife, however, had begun pulling away emotionally long before the idea of relocating came into the conversation. It wasn't that she didn't love him, Joan clarified, but their lives had grown in different directions. Gerry's dream was always to build a life full of adventure, new experiences. He had this energy about him that craved exploring new places, meeting new people. His ex-wife, on the other hand, became more grounded in her routines. She didn't want to live out of a suitcase, always on the move. Joan paused for a moment, as if considering the weight of her next words. But it wasn't just about location, she said again, a hint of sadness coloring her tone. It was about where they were emotionally, and I think Gerry finally realized that they weren't in the same place anymore. As Joan continued, she painted a picture of a relationship in slow decline, with Gerry's frustrations bubbling beneath the surface. He had wanted to talk, to work through their differences, but his ex-wife had grown distant, focused on other priorities. Her career, her friends, her own inner world. The decision to divorce, Joan explained, wasn't an impulsive one. It was a quiet unraveling over the years, punctuated by small arguments that seemed trivial on the outside, but symbolized a larger disconnect. By the time Gerry mentioned moving to a different location to reignite their lives, it was merely a tipping point. Gerry once told me that it wasn't the big fights that ended things, Joan recalled. It was the absence of fights, the absence of passion. They had just stopped trying. Joan's voice softened as she talked about how Gerry had tried to convince himself that moving would fix everything. A change of scenery, new faces, new adventures. Maybe that would bring the spark back. But deep down, he knew the problem wasn't external. It was in the way they had stopped communicating, the way their silences became more comfortable than their conversations. By the time the divorce papers were signed, it was almost a relief. I think for Gerry, it was less about the heartbreak of losing her and more about the heartbreak of losing what they once had, Joan said quietly. He's the kind of man who pours his whole heart into a relationship. And when that fades, he takes it hard. The interviewer listened intently, jotting down notes, but Joan could tell from her expression that this side of Gerry, the one that hadn't been shown on TV, was adding layers to his image.